What's up, fellas? Welcome to a brand new episode of The Sports Student. My name is Wendell Epps, aka The Sports Student. In today's podcast, I'll be interviewing Nathan Epstein. Nathan is currently a sports anchor, reporter, and producer for WAVY-TV. He's held this position for many years now and has truly seen it all when it comes to the sports media industry. And in this podcast, he'll talk about how he got started in the industry and also share some tips and tricks on how to succeed in the sports media industry as a whole. So sit back, relax, enjoy the podcast, and without further ado, this is a sports student interview with Nathan Epstein. Today, I am joined by Nathan Epstein. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. How's it going? How's your summer been going?
Hey, Wendell, thank you very much for having me. It's been great. We're actually happy to have sports back. We're actually glad to be working again. Obviously, as everybody knows, last summer was a bit of a trying time. So happy to be back to work again. And hey, look, we got NFL training camp starting up in about a week. So we're ready to get rolling again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great to see that football is going to be coming back soon. I know everyone's ready to have the NFL back on their screen. So first things first, can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and where you got started in the industry and where you are today?
Sure. Well, it's funny how I got here and when I started is a bit of a blur because I actually started calling into radio shows when I was about 13 years old. And I started interning for a radio station when I was 16 in Richmond. And just like what you're doing, I became heavily involved in my college media scene when I was broadcasting basketball games and broadcasting games for Longwood University. I was a college broadcaster, the same as you are. And, where I went to school, I actually had to get an internship. So I got an internship for WAVY-TV 10 when I was heading into my senior year at Longwood. I gained a lot of experience doing that. And I was able to use that to get a job not long after I graduated. My first job was actually in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And if anybody told me as a junior in college that I would be working in Mississippi, I'd have told you were crazy. But that's kind of where this business will take you. It'll take you to some cool places and you'll get to do a lot of cool things. And my first job was as the lead sports anchor for WDAM down in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And I worked there for almost 2 years, I would say about a year and 7 months. And there was a job opening at the place where I interned. And luckily enough, it was also my hometown. So I was able to apply and get a job. And I've been working at WAVY-TV for the last 8 years doing sports on the weekends for WAVY-TV 10 and the Fox 43 Sports Wrap. Got to see some cool things, got to do some cool things. And it's pretty much where we are. But, it's, as my mentor once said, it's a grind. It always is a grind, but it's fun. It's rewarding. It is, fulfilling to be able to tell some unique stories and to do some cool things and to see some, to be front and center for some of the sporting events that we see. So that's kind of where we are right now.
That's fantastic to hear. I have to know, since you were in Mississippi, what would you say was like the most fun thing to do? What would you do to keep yourself entertained and occupied in Mississippi?
Well, it's funny because I tell everybody that my first year there was a bit of a challenge because that was the first time I'd ever moved away from Virginia to a point where, I'd always been at least a drive away from anybody, from family, from friends. If I needed to see anybody, if I wanted to see anybody, I was always a drive away. Well, when you're in Mississippi, that's not the case anymore. You're on an island, essentially. So it took me a while to kind of adjust and to kind of find your spots and to make some new friends and to kind of gain a social footing, so to speak, but eventually, you meet some cool people and you see some cool things. And, there were a lot of little spots, and Hattiesburg is actually a bit of a college town. I mean, it's the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. So, there's some cool spots there, not to mention you're about an hour and 45 minutes away from New Orleans. So I was able to go to a few Saints games and to kind of see New Orleans a little bit. So, it's a fun place when you find, I know that sort of the rag on Mississippi is that it's deep South and there's nothing to do and everything, but actually it's culturally a very unique place. And you go to New Orleans and of course everybody knows about the culture down there. The music scene is awesome. So, it took me a while to adjust a little bit, and it was actually a little bittersweet leaving, to be honest, because when you spend almost 2 years there and you make, new friends there and you find your spots, uh, to kind of say, okay, now you're moving back, as excited as I was, it was a bit bittersweet. So, it's a fun spot. It really is. And I wouldn't have changed it. I wouldn't have changed it.
Hey, that's great to hear. It's always fun to get a new experience and, move out of a new state. I mean, I'm from Virginia myself, so I know how it is, being in Virginia long term, and getting out of there for a little while definitely can, help in ways.
Where are you from? What part of Virginia are you from?
So I was actually born up in Northern Virginia, Fairfax.
Fairfax.
Yeah, lived there my whole life, and then finally got to get out for college for a little bit. But all these podcasts are being recorded from Northern Virginia, so back
There you
home.
go.
Yeah, where the roots started. But I want to know, because right now you're a sports anchor right now in Virginia, and I just want to know, first thing first, like, what's the easiest and hardest thing about being a sports anchor? If you could pick just one thing that's really easy about it, one thing that's really hard, what would be your answer to that?
I know this kind of sounds like a cliche answer, but I'd say the easiest thing is just the fact that you're covering sports. I
Very
mean,
true.
it's you work with people who, when you talk about news, and when you talk about local news especially, you deal with a lot of tragic stories when you're in the news side of things. There's a
Right.
lot of, unfortunate news, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
bad news. But when you're in sports, I mean, you kind of wake up to the realization that I'm covering sports for a living. So that's the easiest part. It's knowing that no matter what kind of a day is ahead of you, you're covering, games for a living, and you're covering features and people that are playing sports for a living. And I think that sort of gives you the juice that you're looking for. And no matter how difficult of a day may be ahead of you, that's kind of where and that's kind of where my mindset goes. And not to mention, the easiest part of it also is, in this business, you kind of make your own schedule a little bit. Yes, there's always going to be sportscasts that you have to go on and do, but with my schedule, I mean, as long as I get my stuff done, I can pretty much make my own schedule. So it's not like you got to be in an office chair by 9 o'clock in the morning. It's not like you got to be, punching a clock and waiting until 5 o'clock in the afternoon, looking at a clock, waiting for the day to end. The hours are very fluid. So in that sense, I think that kind of makes it easier. Now it can kind of make it interesting at times, but I think that kind of makes it easier. The hardest thing I would say is the hardest thing I would say is pretty much is the organization. And I'd say it also depends on which organization you belong to, because you can belong to a good organization, you can belong to a bad organization, you can belong to a company that values sports, that doesn't value sports. So I'm only speaking from my own experience, but I've worked for a company that values sports. And I think that at working for a company that has a 15-minute sports show every night, that can be a challenge, in a sense that when you first start, there's so much you got to organize. And doing a 15-minute sports show every night on television, it's not as easy as putting on a mic, going on television and talking about sports. You have to make sure you have all your video lined up, all your sound lined up. You have to produce everything. You have to write everything. You have to, uh, so I'd say that's the hardest thing, is basically knowing that I have to do everything in a sense of, is a sense of writing, producing, filming, editing, all that stuff. And when you talk about a 15-minute sports show every night, it can be taxing, and I'd say the organization part, especially when you get to this level, can be the hardest thing. Just, knowing that, and there's always the next thing. No matter what you do, there is always going to be the next thing. There's always the next story. There is always the next task you got to take care of. So I'd say that's kind of the hardest thing, with regards to this.
Okay, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I want to know, you being like basically a one-man band with what you do, are there any strategies that you found to be beneficial for you when it comes to trying to make your experience with that whole 15-minute sports segment? Does it make it easier? Have you found anything?
Well, it's basically just reps. I mean, you kind of just have to go through it.
Hmm.
Because I remember when I first got here, to have to, the first few weekends. Again, I'm the weekend sportscaster, so obviously during the football season, when you have two guys working on Saturdays, that kind of makes it a little easier, or two to three guys working on Saturdays. But on Sundays, I'm by myself, and then when the football season is over, Saturday, Sunday, I'm by myself. And when you just get started, it's just something you have to go through. It's just growing pains. Because I mean, I can tell you there have been many times when you look at that clock and you're not quite as far along as you want to be, and you're sweating a little bit, and you're rushing to button up your shirt and rushing to tie your tie and get your mic on and make sure you look presentable. And there were definitely times like that, but you find a rhythm, and you find you find a way to prioritize certain things. And I know I know what I'm giving is kind of a vague answer right now, but I guess specifically what I worry about when I go into a day, first of all, is there anything I have to shoot that day? That's number one I have to worry about. And let's say there's not anything I have to shoot that day. Then I go in and I look at, I decide what are going to be my lead stories. What am I going to talk about first? Once I figure that out, okay, what are the elements of that story that I need? Is there video? Is there sound? Once I figure out, how do I get them? How do I get them into the system? Once I get them into the system, which sound bites am I going to use? Which, video elements am I going to use? I think about all that before I even think about the first word to write, because television is a visual medium. So if you don't have those elements, then what you say is almost, it's not as useful. So, and everything I just told you is very instinctual. It's very, I don't have a list that I go through every day and I say, okay, do I do this? Do I do this? Do I do this? It's kind of instinctual at this point. But, when you first start there, it's basically, it's just a rhythm thing. It's just something that you have to kind of go through. And it's something that, there are times when your heart is going to beat a lot faster than you want it to, and there are going to be times when what we say in this business is, a matter of fact, my producer taught me this phrase, is that the clock is never your friend. The second you wake up in the morning, you are fighting the clock, and that's just the nature of the business. And so, that's just something you build a repertoire, you build a rhythm, you build sort of your own instinctual process of what you go through. And, that's always been mine, especially working weekends for 8 years.
That's fantastic. I love that. So with what you do, is it more of covering like local sports teams? Are there any teams you particularly cover, or is it like every sports team out there?
Well, we cover everything, but we prioritize local.
Okay.
So we have obviously 3 sportscasts every single day. We have the 6 o'clock and the 11 o'clock on our NBC affiliate, WAVY-TV 10. And then we have a 15-minute show every night on Fox 43, the Fox 43 Sports Wrap, which is a 15-minute program. And it's supposed to run every night, but obviously there's certain things that preempt it, whether it's boxing on Fox or Major League Baseball on Fox, or during the fall, it's Pac-12 football, whatever it is. The 6 and 11, we try to localize as much as we can, because we understand that our audience, the local sports audience in general, are mainly local news and weather watchers. So if you try to go on the 6 and 11 on Wavy and try to be Sports Center, you're going to lose a lot of viewers, because that audience is just not as interested in that in-depth, sports as we are, let's say. So I mean, when you watch ESPN and Sports Center, those are true sports fanatics that go in depth. When it comes to local news, we try to come up with interesting feature stories. We try to come up with human interest stories. We try to come up with stories that can reach a more broad audience. Now with the Fox 43 Sports Wrap, we can get a little more sportsy. So obviously it's in the title, it's the Fox 43 Sports Wrap. So the audience that watches that knows exactly what they're getting into. They know they are watching a sports program. Whereas the 6 and 11, you have mainly the news watchers and the weather watchers who may get a glimpse of the sports news. That's why we try to keep it local. We try to keep it more human interest. The Fox 43 Sports Wrap, we'll try to mix in some national stuff, for example. And it's not to say we won't go overboard with that. So, for example, right now tonight is game 6 of the NBA Finals. It's not like we won't show that on our 6 and 11 on NBC. That is something that people are going to care about. Something bigger like the NBA Finals, like Major League Baseball's, like the World Series, like the Super Bowl, the playoffs, whatever it is. Those will always make our local sportscast. But the Fox 43 Sports Wrap we can mix a little more national with that, because again, it's much more of a sports audience, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you guys are able to get a little dose of everything out there in the sports world. I have to ask you, I'm really curious about this, because right now you're like in the Hampton Roads area, and the Hampton Roads is known for being one of the largest cities or areas without a professional sports team. So I want to know, why do you think the Hampton Roads has not gotten a professional sports team? And do you think that there's a chance that they will get one at some point in the near future?
That is the $1 million question. Man, it's been going on for so long. I mean, Hampton Roads is very unique in a sense that it's a 7-city market. You have 7 cities. You have, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, Newport News, Hampton, and I can't go through all of them in my head right now, but 7 cities, 7 city councils, and sometimes those city councils can't agree on anything. So that's a reason. I mean, we've had deals come through where there have been arenas, that have been talked about, and there were contingencies that were put in place, basically that if we were to get an arena, that an NBA team would come with it. But once the arena fell through, then so did the NBA team. There have been talks of, I believe, NHL teams coming through. My producer actually can speak a lot more intelligently on this than I can, because he's been covering local sports here he's been working at Wavy for, I think, 25 years now. But he can talk about all of the times they came close to getting an NHL team, to getting an NBA team. I think the biggest reason is basically what I said, which is you have a very unique setup where it's 7 cities, 7 city councils, as opposed to one city, one city council, one mayor making a decision. And sometimes those councils can't agree on it, and Hampton, the higher ups in Hampton are not going to like it if Norfolk gets an NBA team and all the profit goes to Norfolk and Hampton is left in the cold. So they're not going to agree to that. And the same thing with Virginia Beach in relation to Norfolk, and the same thing with Norfolk in relation to Chesapeake, and Chesapeake in relation to Virginia Beach. And it's just kind of a unique setup. And I think that, unfortunately, that's kind of been a detriment to getting larger things here. I don't think that's a big secret in the area. I think most people know it. But we've been close. I mean, Hampton Roads has been close for a long time. I know that years ago, if I remember correctly, and I may be a little fuzzy on this, but if I remember correctly, United Airlines almost put its headquarters in Norfolk, but instead went to Charlotte. And of course, Charlotte now has several NBA clubs because it's a hub now. So that kind of was almost the case for Norfolk, but just kind of fell through. So for a variety of reasons, Hampton Roads has not had a pro sports team. It is, there have been a lot of people asking the same question for years and years and years. And will it change? I don't know. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. And I think it'd be cool to see an NBA team or an NHL team, or I know this is a big hockey town. The Norfolk Admirals have been a mainstay in this area for years and years. The Norfolk Admirals, when they were AHL, went through one of the greatest runs in hockey history when they won the Calder Cup. So there's a lot of potential here. There really is. But will it happen? No clue.
No, I definitely would love to see a professional sports team in the Hampton Roads area. I feel like it definitely has the market for it. I mean, I've been to the Hampton Roads many times, and just like the people there, I can tell if there was like an NBA or NHL team, like they would be all in, to support them. And I think the unique thing too would be like if they were to just bring one team, that would be, the identity of the area. So
yeah, I mean, and I think that they had years ago they've had the Norfolk Neptunes, which was a pro football team. I mean, they've tried several versions. I mean, heck, if you remember the first team, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. Not the Norfolk Admirals, the Squires, the Norfolk Squires actually was an ABA team.
Yeah,
with Dr. J. I mean, Dr. J played in Norfolk. Think about that for a second. And it was the San Antonio Spurs, the only, the ABA team that actually became an NBA team. So the Norfolk Squires could have become an NBA team. We could have had Dr. J playing an NBA team right here in Hampton Roads. So it's just been a lot of close calls. And yeah, I think you're right. I think this is a sports market. I think that there is definitely there's definitely a sense here that if a team was formed, that people would latch on to it. I think you're right. But then there's a lot of politics involved in everything. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, sometimes politics can get in the way.
Yeah, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Hoping for the best there. But moving on, I want to know, since you first entered the sports media industry, what have you seen sort of change throughout the years since you first entered it, and where do you see it kind of taking off in the next 10 years?
I don't think this is any secret, but just the social media side of things
Absolutely.
has completely gone to another level. Shoot, look at what you're doing right now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, 10 years ago, this didn't happen. I
Yep.
mean, Zoom obviously went to a whole other stratosphere with the pandemic last year, but um, different ways of social media. I know that it's such an old answer now because social media has been around since 2000 what 7 8 something like that, but it just keeps evolving and the information flow is so rapid. And uh, I would say that people get their news in a certain way now. I mean, people talk about cord cutting with regards to watching sports, but they're still watching. And ESPN has absolutely gone all in with their Watch ESPN app, and you've seen streaming services now. There are going to be NFL games now that are broadcast solely on streaming services. I mean, that seemed like that would never have happened 10 years ago with the amount of money that's thrown around with television contracts. So I would say that streaming services have taken off to an incredible level today. Um, Social media, how we devour the information that's out there, how information is pushed, local news stations now are investing way more in web writers and video cutters as opposed to anchors and MMJs, way more than they ever have in the past. And I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. I mean, the way that information flows and the way that the audience consumes it now, that's kind of that. I mean, who knows? I mean, in 5-10 years, who's to say that everything is solely on your phone or your computer or your laptop now? Um, so I think that's where the business is right now. The business is entities, companies are completely putting all of their resources into making sure the audience can consume online as opposed to on television. I mean, a perfect example of that is people aren't rushing home to see the 6 o'clock news anymore. They're not rushing to their televisions to see 6 o'clock news. And heck, NBA finals are on right now. People aren't rushing to their televisions. They pick up their phone and they watch the NBA finals on their phones. That's going to happen with the Super Bowl very soon here. So I mean, the Super Bowl was a TV only product and has been for its entire existence. And now it's going to switch over to, an online product, which, was unheard of, 5-10 years ago. So I think that's, where the business is now. And it's extremely competitive. There are people who are trying every which way to be more creative and to be, to latch on in any way that they can. And yeah, I mean, it's extremely fast paced right now, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, no, definitely. It seems like the industry's just growing and growing day by day. So I have to ask you, which social media platform have you seen provide the most positive benefits for the sports media industry?
Define positive.
Ah,
I would say that look, it's I'd say that for sports, I would say that YouTube has certainly been advantageous. Obviously, Major League Baseball has taken advantage of that, and the NFL has taken advantage of that. And again, sports is a visual medium. We have to see it. Now, granted, yeah,
right.
not to put down people like us who've done play by play on the radio, but
Mhm.
but people like seeing it. So I would say that YouTube has been beneficial in that sense. I would say that Twitter has been great as far as information goes. I mean, what's the first thing? I mean, I'm sure you're just like me. The first thing you check every morning is Twitter,
Oh
and
yeah, definitely.
you check your news feeds, you see what's kind of
Mhm.
going on. Um, so in a sports sense, I mean, anytime there's a breaking news story, you go on Twitter and it's right there.
For
Um,
sure.
I would say that Twitter and YouTube are probably the two biggest ones, that I would say. And obviously, when you talk about the streaming services that have, Hulu is getting into the sports broadcasting game. As I mentioned before, you've seen Peacock, getting into it. I think those have been, and look, companies are utilizing Instagram now. Instagram was kind of an afterthought, 5-6 years ago. And now, I mean, it's become one of the bigger outlets now with, when you see what SportsCenter's doing, when you see what all these companies are doing now, utilizing just that 5, 10, 15-second attention span that we all have, to get big plays out there, to get moments out there. I think those three are the first that come to mind: Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, those have definitely been big platforms that have truly helped enhance the sports media industry as a whole. So now I want to kind of take you back in time. Do you remember the first story you ever did on the news?
Whoa. I'd have to think about that. The first story I ever did on the news. I think the first story I ever did, I'd have to go back to Mississippi. It was either a story that I did on a former University of Southern Mississippi football player who played for the Titans, and his name escapes me now. I still follow him on Twitter, actually, but it was either him. He was doing an event at like a local Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that. It was either that, or it was a story of a local rodeo champion. Because I do remember that was one of my first stories where I actually had to wake up early, drive out to, the sticks in the middle of Mississippi. And by the way, that was a real eye opener for me. I do remember that for some odd reason. I do remember driving on my way to the story, and I'm in the back roads in Mississippi. All right. I mean, if GPS didn't exist, I'd be as lost could get. And I just remember sitting there going like, this is real life right now. Like I'm in the back roads in Mississippi right now, so why that memory sticks with me, I don't know. But I think that was one of my first ones. It was either that, the Southern Mississippi football player, or it was a local rodeo champion, that I had to go out there, which was awesome. I mean, he's out there, he's out there, they're letting the horses out, of his barn, and he's showing me how to ride them, and it was pretty cool. That's one of those stories. I'm not sure which one it was, but it was one of those stories that was my first.
Okay, yeah, two very different topics, but two very cool topics at the same time. So that's awesome.
Very true. Very, very true.
Do you have a story that maybe you did that like was unexpected? Like you headed into it with a certain mindset, like, oh, this is how it's going to run, and maybe something unexpected or funny happened. You have anything you can share with us about that?
Nothing comes to mind as far as, nothing comes to mind really as far as unexpected, I would say, because I mean, usually what you're getting into, and that's sort of the thing. It's like, with sports, with feature telling, when it comes to sports, you kind of know what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the biggest examples of that are maybe, when you go to the games, and you expect something to happen, and you kind of have a plan in your head of how you're going to cover this game or this event. And then it goes completely different. I mean, I can tell you that as far as unexpected twists are concerned, I remember I was in Richmond one time covering the state championships for boys and girls basketball. It was a long day. I just finished up a live shot at 6:00, and again, live shot completely on my own. So I'm tired. I'm ready to kind of, call it a day. I'm in Richmond, and my producer says, "Hey, Nathan, Virginia Wesleyan is in the Division III Elite Eight. They're playing at Randolph-Macon, which is in Ashburn. That's about 25 minutes outside of Richmond. How about you go up there and you cover that?" And I didn't want to. I was like, daggone it. I was so tired, I mean, I was just like, all right, I'm a team player. I'll do it, all right. So I go up there, and you get in there, and Randolph-Macon, by the way, is one of the toughest home court advantages in the country in Division III. I think at one point they won like 30 straight home games. And I get there, and Virginia Wesleyan is a local team, so they're from Virginia Beach. And that's why he suggested it. It wasn't just some random game. He said, our local team is in the Division III Elite Eight, chance to go to the Final Four. I said, sure. So I said, all right, I'll go over there. I get over there, and Virginia Wesleyan upsets the number one ranked team in the country on their home floor in the middle of this rambunctious crowd. And I got all this great video of our team celebrating. And they were an at-large team that wasn't expected to do much in the tournament, that ended up going to the Final Four. And that trip turned into a trip to Salem where I covered them in the Final Four. So that was unexpected. And it was great. I mean, I was tired. I was kind of ready for the day to end. And then I get there and you see this, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about how you're covering sports and it's fun. And that adrenaline kind of starts rushing through you just watching these moments. And that was one of those moments where I see Virginia Wesleyan celebrate and they're jumping up and down. They just made the Final Four. I get to see the nets cut down, and I got to do another live shot that night. It's like that was an unexpected turn, a very much unexpected turn. And that's one of them that sticks out, for sure.
Yeah, that's very cool. It started off as, a general assignment, and it just turned into this whole big barrage. That's fantastic.
Yeah, just normal day, normal day, and you're just about ready to call it. And I give my producer credit every time we talk about that story. He was the one that I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't mention. He was the one that said, "Why don't you go up to Ashburn?" And I was like, "Oh, come on." And he's like, he's like, "Why don't you do it?" I said, "All right, fine, I'll do it." So that turned into getting awesome video of them winning, an Elite Eight game, cutting down the nets, going to a Final Four. And then that turned into going to a Division III Final Four, which was a very cool thing to see.
Definitely. For sure. So looking back on your college experience, back when you were at college, is there anything that you wish you knew back then that you probably didn't learn till later that you would give to current college students studying sports and news media?
Oh, well, that's yes. I mean, that goes without saying that, when you're older and wiser, I mean, there's certain things there, you can always look back and say, if I'd only known then what I know now, and that'll always happen. I don't think that'll ever stop. If you're always a student of the game, then you're always going to learn something new that if you'd have said, oh, if I'd have known that back then, but I mean, you always, I think that my job, first of all, was way different back then than it is now. I mean, I was a play-by-play guy back in college, and I'm more of a feature storyteller now, editor, photographer, local sports anchor now, as opposed. So the job description and the way the actual job is very different. But that being said, I mean, you definitely. I think I would have been a better play-by-play voice back then. Now if I take what I know now and put it back then, I think I would have been a better storyteller back then. Because play-by-play, the one similarity between play-by-play and local sports anchoring is it's all about telling a story. It's all about a beginning, middle, end, and it's all about giving something to the audience that makes it more enjoyable, or that moves them in some way, that makes them care in some way. So that's how play-by-play and local sports anchoring are linked. And in that sense, I think back then if I knew then what I know now, I would have been a better storyteller. I would have been a much better. You learn, and this as a play-by-play guy, it's not about just telling a stat. It's not just about this guy has. This guy shoots 33% from the field all year. It's not just about that. It's how can you connect that to a story? How can you tell a story? How can you tell the story of a season, of a game, of a player? How can you utilize that? And I think that that's stuff you learn as you go along. And if I could utilize that back then, I think that's the thing that sort of stands out for me.
I love that. Yeah, no, definitely all about being a storyteller, and, what we're doing in the sports media realm, like you have a chance to inspire people, you have a chance to tell really cool stories. You have a chance to really get to know some really fantastic athletes and coaches. And sometimes we forget that professional athletes and coaches, like they're human beings at the end of the day. They all came from a certain background. It's just really like amazing. And that's just like really the beauty of sports in general.
No doubt. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, Nathan, I want to go ahead and end this interview with a little bit of a rapid fire if you're up for it.
Sure, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Flying.
Favorite sports movie?
Oh, geez, that's too. What is this? Oh, God. Favorite sports movie? There's too many. Oh man, that one's tough. I'm going to go off the rails here. This one is not, I mean, people say Bull Durham and people say The Natural or people say Rudy or people say like that. And those are all classics. Okay. But I'm going to go off the rails here. I'm going to say The Replacements. I love The Replacements.
Oh, nice. I love that. I love that.
I
All
love those.
right. If the Hampton Roads were to get a professional sports team, what would be the name of the team? What would you like to see the team name be?
What would I like to see the team name be? I mean, we can't even decide on the next Washington team name. So let me see here. I would say, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I really, it's already a name that exists, but I mean, I do love the Norfolk Admirals. I mean, it fits the area so well. I
For
mean,
sure.
the area, it's a Navy town. It's a Navy, market. I mean, if we ever, this may be a cop out, but I would love to see the Norfolk Admirals become an NHL team. I think that'd be awesome.
That would be awesome.
I'd go to those. I'd go to those games all the time. I think the Norfolk Admirals. I think the Admirals just fits this market. It's a Navy town. It's a Navy market. I'd love to see the Admirals stick.
Okay, love that. Favorite thing to do in the Hampton Roads area?
Golf.
What's one food you can't live without?
Hot wings.
Favorite social media platform?
Instagram.
Funniest athlete you ever interviewed?
Ooh, funniest athlete I've ever interviewed. Brett Favre.
Very cool. Favorite subject in school growing up?
It was math.
Nice. Favorite genre of music?
Classic rock.
Cool. And what's one fun fact that a lot of people do not know about Nathan Epstein?
What is one fun fact that people do not know about Nathan Epstein? I can be good at impressions, with accents. I'm very good with accents, but also not about me personally, but I say this to a lot of people. My grandfather actually sold a suit to Dr. J. That's, my grandfather owned and operated a men's clothing business in Hampton Roads for 50 years. And I always say my claim to fame is my grandfather actually, when Dr. J, before people knew him as Dr. J, sold him his first suit when he played for the Norfolk Squires. When he played for the Squires, he sold Dr. J a suit.
That's awesome. I love that. Love that. All right, Nathan. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast today. You really provided some great insight. And I mean, you've done some amazing things in the sports media industry. So just keep up the great work. I can't wait to see what else you do.
Hey, Wendell, thank you very much. And congratulations to all of your success so far. You seem like you're doing a great job. And I'm hoping for good things for you in the future. So thanks for having me on, Wendell. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that as well. Thank you again for coming on. All right, fellas. So that was a sports student interview with Nathan Epstein. Another big shout out to Nathan for coming on the podcast today. He was a great guest to have on. But that'll do it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in my next one. All right, y'all. Take care. Sports student signing out. Peace.